When my husband demanded a divorce after 15 years of marriage, I quietly agreed and signed the papers without a word of protest. That evening, he was celebrating at our favorite restaurant with his mistress. I walked in, maintaining my composure, offering him a smile as if everything were fine. "Congratulations on your freedom," I said, sliding an envelope across the table. His smug smile vanished as he read the DNA test results inside the envelope. I had always believed that my 15-year marriage with David was perfect. We had a beautiful home in a quiet suburban neighborhood, 3 wonderful children, and a life that seemed picture perfect. But it was all an illusion, one I shattered on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday morning. That day, as I was gathering clothes for dry cleaning, I stumbled upon one of David's white dress shirts, stuffed hastily behind the shoe rack. It was unusual enough to make me pause. David was obsessively neat. He never left his clothes in disarray like this. I picked it up, my heartbeat quickening, as I noticed a vivid red lipstick stain on the collar. I blinked, hoping I was imagining things, but I wasn't. A glaring mark, undeniable. A wave of nausea rose in my throat as I gripped the shirt and walked into the bathroom, where David was taking a hot shower before heading to the hospital. I forced my voice to remain steady. "David, there's a stain on your shirt." He glanced at it for barely a second before responding nonchalantly. "Oh, that must be a patient's blood. You know, emergency surgery last night." I clenched the fabric in my hands. No surgeon wears a white dress shirt into the operating room. I knew that, and he knew that I knew. The suspicion gnawed at me all day. I tried to push it aside, convincing myself there had to be a logical explanation. But the next evening, when David left his phone on the kitchen counter before heading to the shower, I couldn't stop myself from picking it up and unlocking it. A message immediately popped up. "Dr. Vanessa Carter. Last night was amazing. I can't wait to feel you inside me again." It felt like someone had slapped me across the face. My hands shook as I scrolled up, revealing message after message, filled with flirtation, intimate photos, and carefully planned rendezvous, arranged while I was picking up the kids, preparing dinner, or trusting that my husband was at the hospital saving lives. In that moment, my entire world came crashing down. I didn't confront David immediately. Instead, I let the weight of my discovery settle in, suffocating but clarifying. That night, as he kissed me on the forehead and whispered a distracted "good night," I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, piecing together every late night at the hospital, every canceled dinner, every dismissive response to my concerns. How long had I been living in a lie? By morning, I had made my decision. I wouldn't just react, I would prepare. David had left for the hospital before dawn, as usual, and I found myself standing in front of our home safe, my hands trembling as I punched in the code. Inside, among neatly filed tax returns, property deeds, and investment statements, I saw what I was looking for: 15 years of financial records. As I sifted through them, something caught my eye: monthly withdrawals from our joint savings account. $5,000, $7,500, sometimes even $10,000. The money had been transferred to an entity called Riverside Holdings, LLC. I frowned. I had never heard of this company before. My stomach churned as I flipped through the records, noting that over the past 2 years, nearly $250,000 had been funneled into this account. But for what? Trying to steady my breathing, I called our bank. The account manager hesitated, but eventually confirmed my worst fears. Riverside Holdings was a limited liability company solely under David's name. A company I knew nothing about. A company he had been secretly transferring money to, while I had been budgeting for groceries and school tuition. I hung up, my hands ice cold. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. David wasn't just cheating on me. He was hiding money. I needed help. That afternoon, I scheduled an appointment with Patricia Winters, the most ruthless divorce attorney in the city. I had seen her name in the news before, representing high-profile cases where cheating husbands thought they could walk away unscathed. When I slid the bank statements across her desk, she barely lifted an eyebrow before saying, "He's trying to hide assets before the divorce. This is standard." "Standard?" I asked, still reeling. She nodded, flipping through the records. "It's a common tactic. Men like David move money into shell companies, thinking they can reduce the amount they have to pay in settlements or alimony. But this," she tapped one of the statements, "this suggests something more calculated, something long-term." I swallowed hard. Like what? Like he's been planning this for years. The words hit me like a brick wall. Years. Had David been preparing for this betrayal long before I even suspected the affair? Patricia leaned forward, her voice steely. "If you want to win this, Jennifer, you need to document everything, every account, every transfer, every discrepancy." I straightened my back, something in me hardening. I wouldn't let him get away with this. That night, after tucking the kids into bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of wine and my laptop. I pulled up every financial document I could find, comparing statements, searching for patterns. And that was when I noticed it, a connection between Riverside Holdings and Ashford Medical Center, David's hospital. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just a secret bank account. This was something bigger, something darker. I wasn't just dealing with a cheating husband. I was dealing with a man who had been lying to me about far more than an affair. I had prepared myself for the confrontation. I had spent hours rehearsing in my mind. Every word I would say, every way I would force David to admit to the affair, every moment I would shatter the illusion of our marriage. But when the moment came, it unfolded in a way I could have never anticipated. That night, after the kids were asleep, I stood in our bedroom, the room where we had built our life together, the bed where we once whispered about future dreams, where we held each other through pain and victory. But now, it felt cold, foreign. David walked in, dropping his briefcase, as if this was just any other evening, as if nothing had changed. "You're having an affair with Dr. Vanessa Carter, aren't you?" I asked, my voice calmer than I expected. He paused for just a second before casually replying, "Yes." The way he said it, as though he were confirming a restaurant reservation, made my spine stiffen with cold dread. "How long? Does it matter?" He loosened his tie and walked toward the closet, as if this conversation was just a minor inconvenience. I swallowed the rising fury. "Do you really think it doesn't matter? That this marriage, this family, everything we've built means nothing to you?" David sighed and finally turned to look at me. "Lauren, I want a divorce." Those words struck me like a blow, not because they surprised me, but because the ease with which he said them felt like a cold, deliberate execution. "I want a divorce," I repeated blankly. "Why?" A half smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "I've outgrown this life. I've outgrown you." He waved his hand around the room, as though our home was just an old, unwanted possession he no longer cared for. Anger boiled inside me. "We built this life together, David. You have what you have today because I gave up my career, took care of our kids, so you could chase your ambitions." He smirked, his voice sharp as a knife. "And what did you do, Lauren?" "Bake cookies for school meetings, sort my sock drawers. I save lives. I built this career despite the weight of family life." Each word felt like an invisible punch. That night, he slept in the guest room. The next morning, before he left the house, he left a business card for his lawyer on the kitchen counter. But I didn't know then. His affair was just the beginning of the betrayal. I had no intention of becoming the abandoned, weak, and helpless wife. In the following days, I calmly gathered evidence, reviewed our finances, and searched for hidden assets. I was determined to expose David. And then, Dr. Nathan Brooks appeared. Nathan was an old colleague of David's, a name I vaguely remembered from hospital parties. He had left Ashford Medical Center years ago under mysterious circumstances. When my lawyer, Patricia, mentioned him, saying Nathan had a falling out with David, I knew I needed to meet him. It took 5 phone calls before he agreed to meet me. We sat across from each other in a small cafe, the dim lighting highlighting the tired lines on Nathan's face. He studied me for a long moment before speaking. "I always knew this day would come," Nathan said. "I just didn't know which one of us would break first. You, from your conscience, or David, from his arrogance." His words sent a chill down my spine. "What do you mean?" Nathan took a deep breath and slowly said, "Lauren, there's something you need to know about your children." I froze. "What are you talking about?" Nathan hesitated before pulling out a stack of papers and pushing them toward me. I opened it, my eyes quickly scanning medical records, signatures, clinical notes, all with David's name. "What is this?" I whispered, confusion washing over me. He looked straight into my eyes, his voice heavy. "David has hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, a hereditary heart disease, mild in his case, but with a 50% chance of passing it on to the children." I gripped the papers tightly. "What does that have to do with my kids?" Nathan gritted his teeth before saying the words that shattered my world. "When you two did IVF, David made sure his sperm was never used. He falsified medical records and replaced it with donor sperm." I froze. "No." I shook my head, trying to deny it. "That can't be. We tried for so long to have children. He wanted kids." Nathan looked at me seriously. He wanted control. He didn't want children with his genetic condition, so he decided for you, without telling you. The dizziness hit me like a tidal wave. "So you're saying David isn't the biological father of my children?" Nathan nodded slowly. "I'm so sorry." I couldn't breathe. 15 years. 15 years of raising, loving, and protecting my children, not knowing they weren't David's. David had known all along. He had lied to me from the start. My throat went dry. "I need proof." Nathan slid a piece of paper toward me. "This is the contact information for a genetic testing lab. If you want to know the truth, get them tested." That night, after the kids were asleep, I quietly collected DNA samples, some hair from their combs, saliva from their toothbrushes. I even took one of David's combs from the bathroom. 2 weeks of waiting was a nightmare. When the results came in, I opened the email with trembling hands. "The alleged father is excluded as the biological father of the tested children. The probability of paternity is 0%. The world collapsed. I had cried enough. I had suffered enough, and now I would make sure David didn't get away with it." After receiving the DNA test results, I didn't confront him right away. I knew that if I wanted to take David down, I had to do it strategically, precisely, and without leaving him a way out. I started by gathering evidence. From the suspicious financial records I had already found, I knew David wasn't just hiding money before the divorce. He was involved in shady transactions linked to the IVF clinic at Ashford Medical Center. If David had secretly replaced his sperm during our IVF process, how many other families had been deceived the same way? With the help of my attorney, Patricia Winters, I reached out to other patients who had undergone IVF treatments at Ashford. Some refused to talk, unwilling to question the origins of their own children. But 5 families agreed to meet me. Their stories were eerily similar. Unexplained IVF failures, children who looked nothing like their fathers, vague and dismissive answers from the clinic when they had concerns. They too took DNA tests, and the results were horrifying. Their husbands were not the biological fathers of their children. Now I had what I needed. But to destroy David completely, I needed someone who could bring this case to light in the most powerful way. That's when I contacted Michael Dawson, a medical investigator who had been tracking fraudulent activities at Ashford Medical Center. After one meeting, he understood the gravity of the situation. I provided Dawson with financial records, patient testimonies, documents from former clinic employees, and most importantly, evidence proving that David had personally authorized sperm replacements in IVF cases. A secret hospital board meeting was scheduled just before David was set to receive the Doctor of the Year award. David had no idea his empire was about to collapse. I received an invitation to the Ashford Medical Center Gala, where David would be honored. A grand event filled with doctors, donors, and esteemed guests congratulating the pillars of medical ethics. David, of course, didn't send me an invite, but I still managed to get one. A few days before the gala, he texted me with his usual patronizing tone. "Lauren, I thought you should know. I'm taking Vanessa to the gala. I hope you can understand and act maturely." I smiled. Oh, I would act maturely, in a way he would never forget. I picked out a sleek black dress, the same color Vanessa had mocked me for wearing in her text to David, and walked into the event looking like a woman who had gracefully moved on. I spotted him instantly. David stood on stage, basking in applause, preaching about medical ethics and trust between doctors and patients. The audience clapped, but I knew the police were already waiting outside. After receiving his award, David and Vanessa left for the restaurant that used to be ours to celebrate. I waited 20 minutes, then walked in. I approached their table, my expression calm, my smile polite. David looked up, momentarily startled, before his usual smug grin appeared. "Lauren, what are you doing here?" I placed an envelope on the table. "Congratulations on your freedom." Vanessa frowned. David glanced at the envelope, curiosity flickering across his face as he opened it. And then, his entire expression changed. He went pale. His hands trembled as he stared at the DNA results. No, this isn't possible," he muttered, his voice barely audible. Vanessa skimmed the document, then turned to David with pure disgust in her eyes. "What does this mean? Your children aren't biologically yours," she asked, her voice shaking. I crossed my arms, my gaze steady. Turns out, the most ethical doctor in the hospital isn't just a cheater. He's also a fraud. David looked up at me, his face flushing with rage. You planned this?" Before I could answer, a voice cool and authoritative cut through the air. "Dr. David Mitchell, you are under arrest for medical fraud, embezzlement, and violations of medical ethics." The police stormed in. The entire restaurant fell silent as two officers handcuffed David in front of everyone. Vanessa stumbled back in shock, but there was nothing she could do. I leaned in close, whispering in David's ear as they pulled him away. "You spent 15 years building this lie. I only needed 3 months to destroy it." He stared at me, pure panic in his eyes, realizing that his entire life was crumbling. As David was escorted out of the restaurant, I picked up my wine glass and took a slow, satisfied sip. I had reclaimed justice for myself, but more than that, I had reclaimed my own life. For the first time in 15 years, I woke up without the weight of David's shadow looming over me. The legal battles were over. His assets had been seized, his medical license revoked, and his reputation shattered beyond repair. But more importantly, I was free. The house, once filled with the suffocating echoes of betrayal, now felt lighter. The kids and I built new routines. Pancake breakfasts on Sundays, movie nights where laughter replaced the silence that once lingered between us. I had secured our future, ensuring that no part of David's deception could ever touch them again. And as for me, I was no longer just Lauren Mitchell, the doctor's wife. I was Lauren Mitchell, survivor, fighter, a woman who reclaimed her own story. As I sipped my morning coffee, staring out at the sunrise, a realization settled deep in my chest. This was just the beginning. Betrayal has a way of breaking you, then rebuilding you into someone stronger. What I once saw as the end of my world was, in reality, the beginning of something far greater, the freedom to reclaim my life. This journey taught me that trust should never be blind, and love should never come at the cost of self-respect. We often hold on to illusions because they feel safe, but the truth, no matter how painful, is what truly sets us free. Strength is not measured by enduring pain in silence, but by choosing to walk away from what no longer serves you. And most importantly, justice is not always loud. Sometimes it is simply the quiet triumph of knowing you survived, rebuilt, and thrived. If you enjoy deep, emotional, and meaningful stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new update. Your support is the motivation that drives us to keep bringing you powerful stories. Once again, thank you for being here, and see you in the next story.